Minute early, but we'll start anytime. My microphone. Like to welcome everybody today. It's a little bit of an unusual time for us to meet, but we only have one agenda item today, which is to take any further public testimony, and then to have the commission vote on a selection of a new executive director to replace our friend Mr. Wyatt here, who's leaving at the end of June. Before we do that, we do need a motion and second to grant a leave of absence to Commissioner Saruta, who is out of town.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. So the one agenda item is kind of the culmination of our long and winding road, to quote the Beatles, which may seem appropriate to some of us older folks, and actually make the selection of our next executive director. As you know, we have spent a number of months in this process, which ended, at least for the candidates' engagement, on May 10th. We interviewed Stephanie Dawson, Jonathan Daniels, and Curtis Robinhold here in Portland in executive session. All three very capable candidates. And that was, as I say, the culmination of a process that, as we talk here further, Bobby Stedman's going to review for us the process in particular. And then once that's completed, I will ask for any further public testimony, if there is any. And then I will ask each of the commissioners, along with telling us their selection for executive director, a brief comment from them about their evaluation of the candidates and the reasoning thought on their part behind their vote for a candidate. And then I will be asking the commission to approve a resolution that would authorize the making of an offer to that candidate and entering into an employment arrangement with them to begin July 1st. So I will ask Bobby at this point to review for us the process that got us here.
First, yay, we're finally at the home stretch, I think. This all started back in January. We hired McDermott and Bull. After doing an RFP, we hired them as our search firm. And we did a press release in January notifying the public that we would be doing a national search for this position. At that time, we also posted the job profile and a link to the McDermott and Bull's website where we could collect public comments to help us inform what the job profile, the final job profile, should actually look like. So in January, we collected 92 public comments, which we shared with the full commission in February. The commission in February, at a commission meeting, the commissioners adopted the hiring process and the search criteria that was otherwise known as the hiring plan. And this included the approval of an advisory group to do the initial interviews. And the advisory group included 4 commissioners as well as 4 community stakeholders. And they represented the labor, environmental, and business groups. Then in March, McDermott and Bull contacted approximately 150 candidates, and through a process distilled those candidates down to 8, which we had identified to move forward in the interview process. I created interview questions for that advisory group based on the public comments we received back in January. So we used those questions during the interview process, which occurred in April, led by Commissioner McDonald. The advisory group spent 2 full days interviewing the 8 candidates and identified 3 candidates to move forward through the interview process. As Commissioner Carter pointed out, those were Jonathan Daniels, Stephanie Dawson, and Curtis Robinhold. The interviews, following the interviews, there was another 2-week public comment period. And during that period, we received 71 public comments, which also included some comments from Port employees. Again, I created interview questions based on those public comments that were then used, that all of you used during the interview process with the 3 final candidates. After creating those interview questions, I had them reviewed and then modified them based on feedback from 3 of the advisory group members, John Molis, Andrea Durbin, and Catherine Lamb. Then on May 10th, the full commission, all of you, interviewed each candidate in executive session. And today, you will reach a decision to employ a new executive director contingent upon a successful negotiation of a compensation package. Furthermore, by approving this agenda item, you will give me the authority to work with the commission officers on said compensation package. So at this time, I'd like to hand it back to the Port Commission President Jim Carter to really lead the conversation on the, to get your perspective on the candidates.
Thanks, Bobby. And if there are any questions that any of you have of Bobby, this is the time to ask. If not, I want to add my 2 cents, I guess, to the process. There was a lot of thoughtful consideration given to how we went about this process. We did make some choices along the way, all compliant with, at a minimum standard, what the public directions are. The directions are for public entities to hire executive directors or leaders. Got some substantial help from our lawyer friend Dan Blaufus, which was always appreciated. But the feedback that I got along the way internally in the process was, to me, an endorsement of the process. People who participated as advisory group members, commissioners as they participated in the interview process and or the advisory group, even occasional employees, as I would bump into them in the hallways, felt like we were really well-intended and became well-informed as to what we were looking for and how our candidates matched up against that profile that we sought. This will not be an easy job to fill after Bill's stint here for 16, 17 years, however long that's been. But it's a great opportunity for both us, the candidate selected, and I think all those related in any way to the port's operation, whether employees or not, to take the opportunity to find a new direction as we move forward, not based on the past, but on a very successful platform that's been created over the past years. So with that, as Bobby has said, the recommendation or the resolution that will be before you after you make your comments and state your selection or your vote for that person will be to authorize Bobby and the officers to negotiate successfully an agreement that will move us into our next tenure of the executive director. So with that, I think I will start with, and Commissioner Saruta, who is out of the country, I think, sent a letter to me to, while he's not able to vote since he couldn't be available either by telephone or here personally, he sent a letter to me with his perspective, and I'll read that to kick off the comments here and the votes of each commissioner. Dear Commission President, I, Tom Saruta, have fully participated in both the interviewing and deliberating processes related to the search for a new executive director of the Port of Portland. While I'm unable to attend today's meeting to vote, I wanted to express my full support for Curtis Robinhold as the new executive director. I believe Curtis, who in my opinion has solid hands-on experiences and proven track record in a leadership position across a wide range of sectors, including for-profit, business, government, legislative, and international, is both well-qualified and well-suited to lead the port through the challenging years ahead. Thank you, Tom Saruta. So that's Commissioner Saruta's perspective on the selection, and I think we don't have to do this alphabetically. I'll just start with Mike Alexander to tell us what your selection is and why.
That felt pretty alphabetical to me.
It just worked out that way.
Okay, well, let me start by saying that I appreciated the opportunity to participate in the search process and in reviewing the slate of candidates who came forward, and to spend more time in working in assessment of the qualifications of our three finalists. A couple of phrases come to mind for me as I thought about my comments today. One is that the better is often the enemy of the good. And in some ways, we are faced with a situation of having benefited from exemplary leadership here at the port. But our focus is not to simply rely on maintaining that posture. It is to take it to another level. And I strongly believe that we had three candidates who each brought a unique set of skills and competencies. But in my opinion, Curtis Reinhold was a superior candidate. The second phrase that comes to mind that I would share is that to whom much is given, much is expected. And Curtis will receive, if he is the candidate who we select today, a rich set of assets. But those assets bring with them emerging challenges, higher expectations, and a number of very significant work that he will have to lead. And I believe that he can bring both the experience and a commitment on the part of all stakeholders to do the best job that the port can do. And so, Mr. President, my vote is for Curtis.
Thank you. Alice?
First, I want to thank the advisory group for its work. I know that a lot of work went into that, many meetings and much thought. And also, I wanted to thank the community for its public comment. I know that I reviewed each piece of public comment that was provided to us and found it all informative. I think the search resulted in a great pool of candidates, as exemplified by the three finalists that we interviewed. And while I was impressed with the knowledge and skill evidenced by each of them, both in their resumes as well as in their interview, I also support the selection of Mr. Robinhold as executive director. I think the port is going to face an imminent crisis with respect to both PERS as well as with its obligations with respect to the Portland Harbor cleanup. And I think we need someone who can quickly step into those issues and understands them. I also appreciate Mr. Robinhold's commitment to equity and inclusion, which is a particular focus of many of the public comments that were provided to us, as well as public comments that supported, in support of him, that were from a wide representation of the community. And finally, I think he has a deep knowledge of the three different business lines that the port runs, and so I think he will be an amazing candidate if the commission so chooses.
Okay. Bob?
Well, certainly for me it was a great process to be able to participate in. I got to see all of the original candidates, and then on the three finalists, I met with them not only in the first interview process, but then twice again, once at a dinner function or lunch function, and then again in executive session. So I felt privileged to be included in that group. So, and I thank Bobby for all the work that she went to. I thought she did a great job. Appreciate that. I believe we were presented by Bull and McDermott with I think they did a good job. We were presented with a at least in the original candidates, and I didn't know there was 150 actually to start with, but with the ones that came here for the interviews, I thought they were all qualified, some more qualified than others, as the process is supposed to bring out. I too believe that Curtis is the best choice for the port at this time. He clearly represents the characteristics that the commission and Bobby had identified in the original characteristics that were needed in an executive director. I believe he understands the challenges ahead with regards to the airport, the marine issues with T6 and that continuing business. I think he understands the industrial lands issue, the general fund sustainability, and as Alice has already mentioned, I think the cleanup issue is on the front burner for the port, for its future and for here in the city. Without question, I think the two things that impressed me the most with the candidates was the discussion about about equality and social justice. I think Curtis lives that. I think he has a very deep understanding of the issues. And I believe that he comes from a background that continues the experience that the port needs in Oregon politics, which I think is a little different than other places. He's worked for-profit organizations, which I believe is also very important. And he understands international trade. I think the challenges ahead are, like Michael talked about, with leadership are daunting for the next executive director. It's not about just being here and continuing the same stuff that's been done in the past, but with all new leadership, I think everybody appreciates what Bill has done, but it's about a new day. And I think that Curtis is the best choice for that. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. I'll just keep this moving around here. So as commissioners, we review and advise the port leadership on decisions they make in pursuit of the best interests of Oregon and Oregonians. Our mission is development of trade for the benefit of Oregon through jobs and sale of Oregon products. But we understand that the lens through which the port's work is done must be as broad as the communities impacted by Oregon's foreign and domestic trade, and that's all of us. We've heard your voices, not just the voices in this room, but the larger public interest through the public comments and engagement of our advisory group. You want functioning marine terminals, a vibrant and world-class airport, a sensitivity to environmental issues, and a port commission and staff that address equity issues. In this search for a new executive director, we have our priorities and have made them known to our recruiters and the candidates. We want effective, fair, and strategic leadership. We need experience with our multiple and complex businesses, with our public and private stakeholders, with our global markets and our rural and urban communities and all the variety that exists within them. From the many applicants for this job, we have 3 very experienced and well-qualified finalists, as others have already noted. These are capable, good people that were in the finalist group. They each bring in different degrees experience in the business of marine terminals, airports, industrial lands and transportation, as well as government relations skills. Their superior qualifications have made this a difficult choice. Our new leader needs the support of the port organization, including our employees, unions representing our employees, the airport workforce who work for airlines and concession businesses, as well as all those who do business with the port, whether domestically or globally, and the Oregon community. It's also critically important the port's executive director have an effective network with the decision makers in Portland, Salem, and throughout the state, nation, and the world. And our new leader needs to be ready to set strategies that are ambitious and will expand jobs and business opportunities and at the same time preserve our environmental for future generations. In my view, the person most qualified to lead the port in tackling our immediate challenges and setting our vision for the future is Curtis Robinhold. I say this without reservation. Curtis is bright, thoughtful, and experienced both here in Oregon and in Washington, D.C., and globally. He has lived outside the country, and he's grown up inside the state. He's a leader, and he has a real compassion for the problems and aspirations of the people the port impacts. So my selection would be Curtis.
I would like to thank Chair Carter, Bobby, and your team for really putting together a superior process in the selection of the next executive director. I was very impressed with the openness to receive public comment and the initial group that screened candidates. It was a good cross-section of our community, and so I really appreciate that. We had 3 great candidates and came from far and wide, New York to Gulfport, Mississippi. So it was a very interesting process to me to listen to the candidates. And I also would like to say that every era of a leader, when you go from one leader to another, you create a new era, and each era has different challenges. Bill had faced his own challenges. We saw the port grow, we saw the airport thrive, and we evolved. The next ED, the same thing will happen. Their personality will be stamped on this organization. And how that new ED interacts with leaders in our community, from the state, local government, and to the federal government, is crucial. And someone who has those talents is what I was looking for. Also, the ability to have international affairs experience was very important. While the other 2 candidates were very interesting, had a great deal of experience, they didn't have the experience in international relations as I saw it, or the inner workings of our state. I'm very excited to, again, without question, support Curtis Robinhold for this position.
Thank you. Pat?
I would like to start with thanking Bobby Stedman for all her work. The process was very thorough, very well done. You managed the outside consulting firm very well, and that is not an easy task. They delivered a highly qualified slate of candidates. And I also wanted to thank Dan and Commissioner Carter for their support of the advisory group. I thought it was brilliant to have members of the community on the group. I have 3 specific reasons why my vote is for Curtis Robinhold. 1, he had the clearest strategic vision. He clearly understands the strategy that needs to be implemented, both to address the maritime challenges as well as to expand the airport simultaneously. He has a proven track record of international business experience in a growth business. And what impressed me the most, there was a very poignant story that he told, and this is not easy for an international leader to stand on foreign soil and stop the job. And he stopped the job for 2 weeks within a corporate environment that rewarded profit. He stopped the job with care and concern for the employees, and they didn't restart until those issues were addressed. So that is what I'm looking forward to, seeing both that strategic business acumen demonstrated along with care and compassion for our nearest neighbors, and a continuation of what I believe has been his own lifelong leadership of creating a community of equity.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bobby. The process was very impressive and very thorough, and I really appreciated that. I got a chance to meet with the top 3 candidates twice, each individually. And it was just a really good process. I really appreciated all 3 of them, and I saw the strengths in all 3 of them, and they were different strengths. And one thing that was a surprise to me during this process is, you know, I've been on the commission for 5 years, but I really didn't know Curtis all that well. His role has been kind of a, you know, the number, he's just kind of the backup guy and I didn't really get to see and hear his vision and understand all the skills he brings to this position. And with my financial background and also what's facing the port coming up, I was very impressed that Curtis is really deep in the financial side. And I think that's really important going forward of what we're facing as a state and as the Port of Portland. So in spite of the fact that, you know, the other candidates had great strengths too, I thought Curtis was the strongest for what we need at this time, and I fully support him.
Thank you. Gary?
Thank you. I would say that the commission did a great job of pulling together candidates. They're all rock stars in their own right. Very hard decision. It was, I think, the public comments that really made this feel like a pretty heavy burden, a big lift, and that I think the rest of the port commissioners would agree that, you know, there's some very risky things that the port has to face yet that have already been commented on and going last kind of, you know, they've already said most of what needed to be said, but, you know, I wanted to reiterate that the other candidates, Stephanie Dawson and Jonathan Daniels, were very well respected, and you know, if Curtis wasn't somebody that was available, I think that you know, one way or another, they would have definitely been able to take us into the future that we're all looking at. But with that, I would vote for Curtis Robinhold, and I really feel like his coming from the community, already having an understanding of what's already going on here, participating in that, and that, you know, he's already a stakeholder as being a part of the community, is a pretty weighty part of the decision. Thank you.
So before I ask the commission to vote on the resolution to authorize the employment, I do want to see if there's anyone, we don't have anyone signed up to speak, but if there's anyone in the audience that wishes to speak at this point before we vote, let us know. Seeing no raised hands. I need a motion and second to pass the resolution, which is recommended by me as president, and I guess I'll just read this resolution. It's fairly short. But be it resolved that approval is given to employ Curtis Robinhold as the executive director of the Port of Portland, subject to successful negotiation of an initial compensation. And be it further resolved that in accordance with the port's bylaws, the port's chief human resources officer is directed to work with the commission officers and McDermott and Bull to negotiate initial compensation to the executive director within the port's salary and benefit structure, and thereafter to employ the selected candidate as the executive director of the Port of Portland through the port's normal employment process effective July 1st, 2017. I would note that my copy of this is a blank to employ whomever, and it turns out it's Curtis Robinhold. So with that, is there a motion and second?
So move.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thanks very much for that. Thanks for all of your participation, those of you in the audience and part of the staff, and we'll welcome Curtis to the new job. Thanks. The meeting's adjourned.